All right, guys, here's the update and the instruction video for the Evolution Revolution Primer Pocket Pro Reamer. Similar to previous generations, but a lot of new updated and nice features. One of those updates is you no longer have to loosen these 3 screws and slide this up and down to adjust your switch. Now the switch is going to be a proximity sensor that will trigger off of the hairpin clip here. As it comes up, it will trigger your proximity switch. You can adjust it by adjusting the 2 outside Allens here. The center one controls the distance in and out for the proximity sensor. Basically, you'll loosen the center one here, and you will slide it in and out. You want to get it as close to this hairpin clip as possible without it touching. If it does touch a little bit, it's not a big deal, but closer the better. The detection distance on these sensors for the size of them is relatively narrow, so you want to keep it as close as possible. Previous versions, you'd have to loosen the screws, slide it up and down, and adjust the micro switch under compression to find your sweet spot for the switch for detection and obstruction of stuff. Now, obviously you don't need to do that. You just 2 Allens up and down. It's got a spring in the center that pushes it up and down and keeps it where it's supposed to be. Another difference here is going to be your vacuum. Your vacuum will evacuate chips from the bottom as well as from the top. The top one will be set in place right next to the reaming station, and I will show you that all set up on the press. So you attach your vacuum here to this white portion, and it obviously tees off, and you have some flexibility on where you want to mount this. There is no official spot to mount this because everybody's press is a little bit different. I personally zip tie it to my shield. I just drill 2 holes, zip tie it, and leave it just like that. These things are very stiff, so getting them into place, they're not going to wiggle around. You really got to twist them to get them to where you want. So that is the 2 major updates that are done on these Evolution Revolution reamers, but they are essentially the same. This end is just like the micro switch on the previous versions. You will plug it into your drive box right above the power input for the DC power. Other than that, let's get started. All right, when you receive your reamer, it will come as the reamer unit with the inner cable exposed. As you can see here, it's very flexible. So you can bend it kind of whichever way you really need it to. Straighter is better, but some guys have different needs. You'll take the 4 screws out of the top of the box. You will set to the side. And then you're going to take this end of your reamer, and you are going to go ahead and slide it through the cable gland. Make sure the cable gland nut is loose here. And you're going to slide the end of the shaft cable into these collar screws. Okay. And then you're going to set it in as deep as it can. Then you'll just tighten these screws up fairly snug. You don't have to gorilla them because you'll just strip the aluminum, but definitely fairly snug because that's what drives the cutter itself. And then when you're all done, you're going to apply a little tension this way with the black outer that just applies a little tension to the cable. And then you'll go ahead and while applying tension, go ahead and screw this cable gland down, and then it's secured. You can't move it from there. But pulling on it pulls this cable taut and just keeps the whole assembly tight. This end here, let me unscrew this cable down. This end here of your reamer will go in right here. It only goes in one way. It's keyed. Go ahead and lock it down. This will be your 12-volt input source. And then the cable running off of here, pretty familiar with that. That's the Mark 7 connector. Go ahead and plug that into your SwageSense. None of these can be shared. There's no commonality between them, so you can't really screw them up. You're installing this thing with the reamer unit itself into the press. You kind of have to twist it at an angle, slide it in, and then you have to compress this spring with your finger and push it into place and get it kind of, you kind of try and pull it up and then pop in. It will pop into the swage yoke. Now with the eye bolt pretty much all the way up, it won't be very hard to get it into place, but most likely you'll end up somewhere around about there in length for your final size. But once it's in place, you can lift it up and you can do half turns, full turns, whatever you need to adjust it to get it correct. So here is how I run my vacuum. As you can see, it will evacuate chips out of the bottom. It will also evacuate chips right out of the top of the shell plate. You want to have this nozzle, fan nozzle, pretty close to your shell plate, if not riding on it. Should not be an issue with the clearance. The tool head does not come down and contact it. So the die may contact it a little bit, but it's generally not a big deal. It's just plastic. So just showing you the overall install of how it is. Generally, I run mine out the back underneath the motor and then back out over here. So this is how it's set up without the vacuum shroud attached. You can see this is in the fully upright extended position. You can see the tip is protruding quite above where it would ever need to go. And also this hole that is right here, that is what you're going to attach your vacuum shroud to. The vacuum shroud has a port on it, the hole right there, and you will slide it up into place, and then you will go ahead and tighten down the screw once it's in the upmost position. All right, now I'm going to run through the way that I find is the easiest way to set this up. Somebody might have an easier way, but it's the easiest way to get this thing going. So when you get it, you're going to want to make sure this eye bolt is screwed all the way in to start. It can be kind of a pain to get it in the first couple of times, but once you realize how to do it, it's a little bit easier. So you're going to take the whole reamer unit itself, and you'll slide the cutting tip in first into the bore that the normal swage rod would go into. You're going to want your press in the complete up stroke, so that way it gives you the most room on the swage yoke. So you're going to go ahead and kind of tilt it in and get it into place. So sometimes you got to kind of compress the bottom with your fingers to get it in. You kind of, now granted I'm doing this with the eye bolt all the way out, so you should be able to do it quite easy with the eye bolt all the way in. So go ahead and get it into place, and what I start doing is I just compress this spring and trying to kind of work it into place and get it up over the swage yoke cover. And like I said, my swage yoke is all the way out, but there you go. See, that will go right in. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get it into place, and you're going to want to go ahead and put in your clevis pin for your swage yoke right through there. Kind of got to move it up and down to find the sweet spot of the hole. Let me see. Might have to move my press down, but that's okay. So, got the pin in. At least it's just temporary for right now. It doesn't need to be permanent. And what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to take a case that has been, primer's been spent out, put it above the station of the reamer. And you're going to go ahead and run your press to the bottom of the stroke. Now you can just leave your clevis pin temporarily installed. It doesn't have to be all the way in. And what you're looking for is right here at the spring. Hard to show up on video. But right here at the spring, you're looking for just a slight amount of compression. So you'll see it just ever so slightly compress that spring on the full downstroke. That's more than enough compression. You just need just a little bit. You don't want to squeeze that too much, because then you're just creating a bunch of extra drag and a bunch of extra pressure that you really don't need. It will actually shorten your lifespan of your blades. and give you false positives once you set it up. So from there, you will go ahead and, sorry, let me reiterate, above your swage, above this reamer station, you're also going to want, now I have an empty tool head, nothing on it, but you're going to want a hold down die. Some guys use sizers, as long as the brass has not been sized already, because you need something to hold this brass from spinning while it's cutting. So Will FW Arms makes pretty good dynamic hold down die. You can use a sizing die. You just need something that's going to hold it, so that way when the cutter comes up, it doesn't try and spin the case. Now, it can spin a little bit. It's not a big deal. Inevitably it will spin a little bit, but it's really not a big deal. But you just don't want it spinning all the time, because then you're not actually getting it cutting. And what it's doing is it's just sitting here spinning. So back to getting a little bit of spring compression. And with your spring compression right here, and with your drive box and your reamer plugged in, you're looking for on, let me get a good picture of it, on your micro switch, there's a little red light when it's active. Now when it's active is when it will tell the machine there's an obstruction. So you'll plug the other end of the drive box, that is the normal, looks like the normal Mark 7 connector. You'll plug that into your Swage Sense connector. Obviously you have to enable Swage Sense on the Mark 7 drive and verify that it works. So basically what you want to do is you want to screw this housing with you want to screw the two outside Allen screws up or down in order to move that up or down to indicate where it's supposed to trip at. Now, with an empty case, deprimed, you don't want it tripping. You really only want it to trip when there's an obstruction. So you can test that if you have a ringer laying around. That's a good one, really probably the best one to use if you have it. Another way is to put a piece of brass that has been not decapped. And I can show you the amount of spring compression you'll get with a piece of brass that has not been decapped. So here's one that has a live primer in it. Go ahead and put it in. And, sorry, let me move the micro switch wire out of the way so I can show you the amount of spring compression you're going to end up with. So see how much that thing moves up now? So you'd want that switch to trip. And basically you want that piece of metal, the hairpin clip will trigger this micro switch at that point. So that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for it to trigger the proximity sensor in order to detect an obstruction. All right, so to achieve your correct spring tension here on this spring that I was showing you about with a case that's deprimed, what you'll do is you basically will take your clevis pin out. You will go ahead and roll. Your machine has to be in the top of the stroke, otherwise you won't be able to get it out. Okay, so there's the top for me. Try to get a better angle for this. There we go. So to achieve a higher position, you'll roll your yoke out of the way and you will spin this. I like to do 1/2 turn at a time. So you'll spin it till you reach the desired height. Don't worry about the switch until you get your desired height correct. That's the first thing. Always get your desired height and run the machine and then see if it's achieving the ream that it should be. If it's not, and you have spring compression, verify that this unit is essentially not touching anything, i.e. your rocker bolt up here. Make sure it's loose and it's not touching. There's a cutout on the back of it, But if you have to loosen these 3 screws, you might have to slide this housing down just a little bit. Basically achieve your height, so how tall the reamer can go on full stroke. Get it to where it's good and you have good spring compression and the ream looks good. And then you'll go ahead and lock your nut down right here. And then you can go ahead and put it in and adjust your switch. Like I stated earlier on how to adjust your switch, you're going to want to do that exactly from there. After all that's set up, then you'll go ahead and install the vacuum shroud. Vacuum shroud is pretty straightforward. This is going to be your bottom. This will be your top. You will slide this up into the reamer unit itself. There's a little cutout. It's in between the press and this, and it's in between the press and this guide rod right here. And you might not have this guide rod on your machine, but I'm trying to make it for every machine. And it will slide up. And then you basically will center it up, and you will put the 1 screw in that I stated earlier. That's right up in here. After that's all set up, you will go ahead and adjust the vacuum so that way it's almost touching that spring. You're basically just trying to evacuate the chips that build up on the top, evacuate the chips that build up on the bottom. And some chips are going to make it through. It's inevitable. But, you know, every so often you'll have to clean it off. Here's some examples of some reamed brass. These are done that are just my personal brass. Random head stamp. Obviously always verify with a go no go gauge. But after you ream them, there's really no issue with insertion of a go no go gauge. So, as you can see, nice good reams on all these. These are all different head stamps mixed. Got any questions? Reach out.